What Artemis the two astronauts will experience that no human has in decades. For more than half a century, no human being has crossed the invisible boundary that separates the living world from what lies beyond low Earth orbit. Since December 1972, when the last Apollo 17 astronauts pressed their final footprints into the dust of the Torres Litro Valley and turned home to a planet that still believed in the future, our species has quietly retreated. We shrank our presence to a thin shell of a few hundred kilometers above the ground, a layer of orbital dust where Earth still fills the window, where the blue horizon remains familiar, where the umbilical cord tying us to the planet has never truly been cut. For 5 decades, we have lived inside a quiet illusion, the illusion that we were still exploring space. The truth is simpler and far more unsettling. We retreated, we slept, and while we slept, entire generations were born, aged, and died without a single member of our species ever seeing the whole Earth fit inside a window, like a small blue coin suspended in absolute nothingness. If this kind of exploration stirs something inside you, if these questions touch a quiet place in your mind, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us. What we are about to trace together is not a lecture, not an article. It is a return to a scale of reality our species almost forgot how to inhabit. Now 4 human beings are preparing to break that long silence. The Artemis 2 mission is not merely a flight, it is a rupture, a historical seam, the end of a civilizational hibernation. Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen will not only travel farther than any living person in decades, they will cross, in the span of a few days, psychological, physiological, and existential thresholds that no simulator, no film, no narrative has ever succeeded in reproducing. They will experience something the collective memory of humanity has allowed itself to forget. And the question that few dare to ask out loud begins to hover above the mission like an old shadow. What happens to the human mind when it sees, with its own eyes, an entire planet reduced to a fragile bubble floating in infinite darkness? After 50 years, in which no one had the courage, the technology, or the need to look again. You are not simply watching a rocket launch. You are watching a species step back out of its cradle for the first time in half a century. What waits for those 4 people is not adventure in the ordinary sense of the word. It is a return to a kind of knowledge that can only be earned with the body, a knowledge the world has almost lost, a knowledge now about to be remembered at an enormous cost and against the silence of 5 dead decades. To understand the enormity of what these 4 astronauts are about to attempt, you first have to picture something almost no one has ever truly pictured. Imagine the International Space Station, humanity's orbital outpost since the year 2000, circling at roughly 400 kilometers above Earth. A distance shorter than the trip between many European capitals, shorter than a morning drive across Texas. If you could somehow drive straight upward, defying gravity, you would reach the station in under 4 hours. That is where we have lived collectively for an entire generation. That is the full extent of our so-called human presence in space, a commute's distance from the ground, close enough that the astronauts inside still see rivers, cities, coastlines, the texture of continents, the familiar choreography of weather systems rolling beneath them like a slow, breathing organism. Now stretch your imagination. Take that same 400 kilometers, multiply it by 1,000. What the Artemis 2 crew will cross is not a morning's drive into the sky, but a distance nearly equal to a full circle around the equator of Earth itself. Repeat it again and again until the planet you were born on shrinks away behind you. At its farthest point, the Orion capsule will be around 400,000 kilometers from home. If Earth were the size of a basketball resting on a table, the moon would be a tennis ball placed across the room, and the astronauts would be floating somewhere past that tennis ball, farther from the basketball than any living human has ever been. Try for a moment to hold this in your mind. Every person you have ever loved, every conversation you have ever had, every building you have walked into, every song ever written, every war ever fought, every grave ever dug, every child's laugh, every whispered confession. All of it compressed into an object smaller than a coin held at arm's length. That is the view that waits for them, not a photograph, not a simulation. The actual visual fact of an entire civilization, an entire biosphere, an entire planetary history reduced to a marble of light against a darkness that has no shape, no edge, no bottom. And this is only the geometry of it. This is only the distance. The real strangeness, the one that begins to reshape the nervous system itself and let it, is that the human body was never designed to witness this. Our eyes evolved to measure a savanna, a forest, a horizon at most a few dozen kilometers wide. To look at your own planet as a small object in a great emptiness is to force the brain into a perceptual size it does not know how to process, into a scale it cannot intuitively survive. And the 4 people aboard Artemis II will have only a few days to learn. And now the strangeness begins to deepen. Because the farther those 4 astronauts move from Earth, the more they cross invisible territories that most of us never think about. Territories that do not appear on any map and do not announce themselves in any window. The first of these is the Van Allen belts, 2 vast, donut-shaped regions of radiation wrapped around the planet like armor we are barely aware of. These belts are the silent guardians of every life form on Earth. They capture charged particles flung at us from the sun and from distant supernovae, funneling them away before they can reach the surface. Every time you sit in a park, every time you look at your hands in the sunlight, you are doing so under the quiet protection of this invisible shield. The Artemis II crew will pierce it. In a matter of hours, their capsule will slice through the inner and outer Van Allen belts, and for those hours their bodies will absorb doses of radiation that no astronaut on the space station has ever received, that no living human has felt since the last Apollo crew returned home. Each cell in their tissue will be crossed by high-energy particles traveling near the speed of light. Most of these particles will pass through them as if they were made of mist. A few will strike the DNA inside their cells. A few will leave scars that will never be measured, but something stranger still will happen. As those charged particles race through the soft jelly of their eyes, some of them will collide with the retina from the inside. And the astronauts will see light, not light from the outside world, not light reflected off any surface, light born from a distant star that died before humans had language, light traveling across the universe for millions of years, now ending its journey inside a human eye closed in the darkness of a sleeping bag. They will close their lids and still see small fleeting sparks drift across their vision like silent fireflies. The Apollo astronauts reported this. They called them cosmic flashes. They whispered about them in debriefs, uncertain, almost embarrassed. Think about that. Imagine closing your eyes in the dark and watching the universe ignite briefly inside your own skull. Imagine a photon born at the heart of an exploding star reaching after an unimaginable journey the precise curve of your retina. You would not be looking at the cosmos. The cosmos would be looking back through you. The body becomes a detector. The mind becomes the dark room where the ancient signal finally develops. And this is only the beginning of what they will cross. Because past the belts, past the radiation, past those small internal fireworks, something waits for them that is far quieter and far more terrifying. At some point during the mission, the Orion capsule will round the eastern edge of the moon and slip behind it, and in that instant a kind of silence will fall that no human alive today has experienced. The moon, a single rock 3,400 kilometers wide, will rise between the astronauts and the Earth and sever every signal, every voice, every whisper of contact with the rest of the species. No radio, no data, no tether of reassurance. Just 4 human beings on one side of a dead gray world and 8 billion on the other, neither able to reach the other across that small ancient distance. This is the paradox that most people never stop to consider. The moon is the nearest celestial body to us. We can see it from every city, every field, every desert. And yet, for the few minutes that the Artemis II crew spends behind it, they will be more completely cut off from humanity than any explorer, any sailor, any prisoner, any hermit in history. Magellan's men, lost for years in the Pacific, could still look up at the same stars as their mothers. The earliest polar explorers, frozen in Arctic ice, could still imagine a line of communication, however slow, between themselves and home. But these 4 people, for those long, quiet minutes, will be unreachable in a way no human being has ever been. Not in silence, in absence. They will not be far from us, they will be hidden from us completely by a wall of ancient stone. And consider for a moment the geometry of what they will see during that hidden passage. They will be facing the far side of the moon, the hemisphere almost no human eyes have ever directly beheld. No astronaut from Apollo ever landed there. The surface below them will be scarred by craters older than the first stirring of life on Earth, lit by a harsh, unfiltered sunlight that no poet has ever described. Above them, the stars will be denser than any photograph can capture, a darkness so total that our ordinary concept of darkness feels like a childish approximation. No atmosphere to soften it, no planet to anchor the emotions, nothing familiar, just the naked universe. And inside that capsule, for those few minutes, each of the 4 astronauts will carry something enormous. They will carry not only the mission, but the accumulated weight of human memory itself. Every prayer, every equation, every lullaby ever sung by a mother, every theorem ever proved, every painting ever made, compressed into 4 fragile bodies in a single metal shell, drifting through a silence no ear on Earth can penetrate. And no one, not even mission control, will know if they are still alive on the other side. When the capsule emerges again from that silence, something will happen that no instrument can measure and no simulator can reproduce. The 4 astronauts will turn toward the window and see Earth, not as a landscape, not as a horizon, not as the vast ground beneath their lives, but as an object, a single, small, luminous sphere suspended in the black, with no visible borders, no visible nations, no visible arguments. Just a fragile blue shape, no larger than a thumbprint at arm's length, holding everything that has ever mattered to any human being who ever lived. Researchers have a name for what this sight does to the mind. They call it the overview effect, and the men who have experienced it have spent the rest of their lives trying to describe it, with almost no success. Edgar Mitchell, the 6th man to walk on the moon, spoke of an epiphany so total that his nervous system was rearranged in real time. He said the old boundaries of the self dissolved, and for a moment he understood, without words, that every atom in his body, in the capsule, in the moon below, in the earth suspended before him, had been forged inside the same dying stars. Alan Bean returned to Earth and could no longer paint anything except the moon over and over for the rest of his life, as if his brush had been captured by a single image he could never exhaust. Jim Irwin came home with a feeling so intense, so quiet, so inexplicable, that he abandoned his career and founded a ministry, convinced he had touched the edge of something sacred. These men did not become astronauts to become mystics. They were test pilots, engineers, military officers. They were trained to distrust sentiment, to answer in data, to strip away the poetic from the procedural. And yet when they looked at Earth from that distance, something in the architecture of their minds reorganized itself permanently. They came back different. Some of them never really came back at all. And here is what almost no one speaks about. That experience, then the deepest, most transforming perception a human being has ever reported, is at this moment almost extinct. 24 men in the history of our species have traveled far enough from Earth to see it as a single object, and most of them are already dead. The knowledge of that view lives now in a handful of elderly men, in fading interviews, in old documentaries. It is quietly disappearing. When the Artemis 2 crew returns, they will not only bring back photographs and scientific data, they will bring back inside their own bodies, inside their own silences, something our civilization has nearly lost, a way of seeing the world that only the world itself can give you. And yet, for every revelation waiting for them on this journey, there is a corresponding danger that the rest of us rarely stop to consider. Because the farther a human being travels from Earth, the less the universe is willing to forgive any error. The Orion capsule, for all its engineering, is in the end a small, thin-walled object. Its outer shell is only a few centimeters thick. Between the 4 astronauts and the absolute vacuum outside, between warmth and a temperature of nearly minus 270 degrees Celsius in the shadow, there is little more than a metallic skin and the silent confidence of the men and women who built it. Every particle of dust in deep space, every fragment of cometary debris, every micrometeoroid drifting for millions of years since the formation of the solar system becomes a potential threat. At the speeds involved, the grain no larger than a poppy seed carries the energy of a rifle bullet. Inside the capsule, their own bodies will become a second, quieter battlefield. Without Earth's magnetic field wrapping around them, cosmic rays from distant galactic explosions will pass through their tissues day and night, chipping microscopic damage into their cells, damage that may take years to surface. Their muscles will begin to weaken within hours of leaving gravity. Their bones will start to lose calcium quietly, silently. Their inner ears, suddenly detached from any sense of up or down, will send confused signals to brains that evolved over millions of years to live on a spinning, gravity-bound world. Even their eyes will change. Pressure in the skull shifts subtly in microgravity, and the optic nerve deforms, sometimes permanently. They will return home seeing the world a little differently, both in a literal sense and in one much harder to describe. And then there is the silence of small errors, a sticking valve, a loose thermal panel, a single miscalculated burn of the engines. In low Earth orbit, a failure can often be survived. Help is close. Rescue is conceivable. At the distance of the moon, the nearest safe harbor is the Earth itself, 3 days of falling away in the wrong direction. A serious problem beyond the halfway point of that journey becomes, by the pure cruelty of orbital mechanics, almost unrecoverable. Every astronaut who has flown that far has understood this, even if they rarely said it aloud. So what these four are really doing, stripped of all ceremony, is trusting the accumulated intelligence of their entire civilization. Its mathematics, its materials science, its weather forecasting, its memory of every past accident. With their lives, they are the sharpened tip of a pyramid of human effort. They are carrying all of it, and it is carrying them. There is something that Artemis 2 will do which no one speaks about in the official documents, because it cannot be quantified. It will return to the collective mind of our species, a way of looking at ourselves that has been absent for 5 decades. For the first time since the early 1970s, children across the world will watch, in real time, 4 living human beings travel far enough from Earth to see it shrink. They will hear their voices carried across 400,000 kilometers of darkness. They will see their photographs, taken not with the grainy film of the Apollo era, but with the high-resolution eyes of a generation that has only known the Earth from above as a digital abstraction. And slowly, quietly, something inside the civilization will begin to change. Because for 50 years we have lived as if the Earth were infinite. We built cities with the assumption that there was always more land somewhere. We burned what we could burn, cut what we could cut, poured what we could pour, as if the atmosphere could absorb every exhaust, as if the oceans could swallow every discharge, as if the planet were a vast and forgiving stage rather than what it really is. A thin, wet skin of chemistry wrapped around a ball of molten iron, suspended in an environment that would kill every one of us in seconds. Seen from within, the Earth is a horizon. Seen from outside, the Earth is a fragility. And that difference, repeated across billions of minds, changes the future of a species. There is also a temporal dimension to all of this that is worth pausing on. Every child alive today will remember where they were when these 4 astronauts passed behind the moon. They will carry that memory into old age, into the middle of this century, into a world we cannot yet imagine. And the small blue sphere they see on their screens will stay with them, lodged somewhere beneath their other memories, quietly reshaping how they vote, how they build, how they grieve, how they love. Apollo did this once. It set the conditions for the first environmental movements, for the first real photographs of Earth as a single planet, for a shift in consciousness whose effects are still rippling through the way we speak about our home. Artemis II will do it again, but this time into a civilization that has already survived pandemics, algorithmic wars, climate tremors, and the quiet erosion of its belief in the future. It will arrive, in other words, at exactly the moment we most need it, a reminder of what we are, what we have built, and what we almost forgot we were capable of doing. And so, when those 4 astronauts finally fall back toward Earth, when the atmosphere ignites around the capsule and the parachutes open over the Pacific and the hatches crack and the light of our planet pours in on their faces once again, they will carry inside them a knowledge that cannot be transferred in words. They will have stood at a distance from the human story long enough to see its shape. They will have watched all of it, every love letter, every revolution, every lullaby, fit inside a single window. They will have floated through a silence older than any of our languages. And they will have returned to a world that, for most people, kept spinning the way it always has, indifferent to the quiet miracle happening in the sky. There is a question that will travel home with them, even if they never pronounce it. It is the same question that Edgar Mitchell brought back, the same one that reshaped Alan Bean's paintings and Jim Irwin's faith. It is the question every human being eventually arrives at, but which almost none of us are forced to confront directly. What is a single human life against the vastness of that darkness? What is the weight of a civilization measured against the silence behind the moon? What does it mean to be a small, warm, breathing animal, briefly awake on a small, warm, breathing world, looking out into a universe so immense that even light grows tired inside it? The answer is not despair. That is the strange beauty of what the Artemis Descendu crew will bring back, because the overview effect, in all its reported forms, has never produced nihilism in those who have lived it. It has produced the opposite. It has produced tenderness, a fierce, almost unbearable tenderness for the earth, for the people on it, for the fragile pattern of life that found a way to open its eyes and stare back into the cosmos from the inside of a metal capsule. It has produced the realization that meaning is not diminished by scale. It is revealed by it. So when you look up tonight and the moon hangs over your street as it has hung over every street in every century since there were streets, try to imagine 4 human beings floating behind it, hidden from all of us for a few minutes, bearing the whole weight of our species in their silence, and understand that they are going there not to conquer anything, not to plant anything, not to own anything, but simply to remind us at last that we were never meant to live with our backs turned to the sky. We were meant to look. We were meant to remember. We were meant to wake up